Could Baylor have some new friends in the conference, or is that just bad business for the Big 12? This is a crossover, Locked On Baylor and Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to a Locked On Big 12 and Locked On Baylor crossover with Cameron Stewart of The Cam Show and Locked On Baylor. Thanks for making these two shows your first listen every single day. I'm Drake Toll from America's number one podcast on the Big 12, Locked On Big 12. Today, Florida State, Clemson out in the ACC. Who's going with them? That's the big Ross Dellinger report as of this week, as well as in the middle segment, why Oklahoma regrets leaving the Big 12 and how Utah got a huge gift from this conference. Camp, to start, Florida State and Clemson leaving the ACC is not going to be a shocker, and it's ensuing. And I find it funny. I think the best quote that Dellinger used in his report is that Jim Phillips said, "You have to stay positive. You always have to stay positive."
That's a great way to end it. Great way to end it.
That's not good. Yeah, that's what it is. You always stay optimistic. You have to, which is a really good.
Which is basically like saying you can either laugh or you can cry. Yeah. And I'm an ugly crier.
It's the end of the funeral where it's like, oh, you know what? Good note. Great note. The guy's still dead. So obviously things aren't looking good over there. And really the entirety of the report talks about how bad the ACC is when it comes to this expansion scenario, and that UNC also wants out. There's a ton of unrest over there. From a Big 12 perspective, though, and he kind of lauds the way that basketball is going in this conference, I feel like we are safe, and especially given where we were 3 years ago. And he mentions even eastward expansion with the Big 12 too. I think that's where we go next, and it's a staunch dichotomy compared to when we thought that TCU was going to the Pac-12.
Yeah. And I think, and I've been thinking about this a lot this week because we had the Baylor athletic director talking about how the Big 12 just needs to get better in football to get its seat at the table. And like, I get that. And I did a whole episode on it yesterday. Like, I totally understand that. But in terms of, there's not going to be more than a Power 4 at this point, right? Pac-12's gone, so there's not going to be a Power 5. There's going to be a Power 4 right now, and I think you put it the right way. We're safe. Like, eventually, it's going to be a Power 3. Right now, it's going to take a lot for you to get into the Power 2. That's not what you need to worry about right now. But as long as there is a Power whatever, and you're still there, that's perfect. And with this Dellinger thing, I think it's. I haven't been following it as closely as Locked On Big 12 has, but it seemed like the first time that I've seen that it's like legitimate. Not only does Clemson and Florida State want to leave, we knew that, but a legitimate report that, there are other schools that are going to go with them. Like, there's smoke, there's fire. We've got people from the board of trustees at UNC saying, yeah, we want to go. We'd like to get out of here too. So it just feels exactly like the way the Pac-12 did. With less options for these teams.
Yeah. And almost, I would argue that as stupid as the Pac-12 looked there at the very end, because there would have been more pathos in the loss of that conference had there not have been as many embarrassing moments from that commissioner saying, we don't know if we're going shopping in the Big 12 yet. And now it seems like Jim Phillips is doing the same thing with the ACC, move after move that just makes him look silly. And including this week saying that he has an ESPN contract through 2036. And they're working on a piece of that contract right now. Working on a piece means that they're trying to make sure ESPN doesn't back out.
They stay on board because, they don't mention that there's an opt-out next year. Like, ESPN can get right out of this thing.
So the whole thing is like the quote of Jim Phillips, like, yeah, we're doing great with ESPN, aside from this one piece. Like, yeah, that is
except for the piece where they might leave. Like, I'm doing great at my job, except for the fact that they might fire me. Other than
that, all of that considered, the one move he made this week was announcing officially that schools will be incentivized on their football wins, that they want to take football so seriously they're going to give you upwards of $1 gajillion if you win a national championship, go to the college football playoff. You could make like 25 mil off of being good at football. I just don't know where the money comes from, especially for a struggling conference, and if this is practical in the end. It's the fun incentive. It's the Michael Scott, I'll pay for your college, and then what happens when somebody wins a national championship and you owe them $30 million?
Yeah, that's the thing. You read the sentence and you're like, I get that.
Yeah,
okay. Like, we're all trying to be better at football. This is a way, no handouts here. That's great. God bless America. And then it's, some team could make the playoff.
Yeah.
Then what do you do? Because there's the whole problem here about the conference realignment and everything with the ACC is there's not enough revenue. That is the whole problem we're coming with. They're like, yeah, I know we're not making enough money, but what if we gave you more money? How? How?
Yeah. I don't know where it's coming from, and I'm not sure if Jim Phillips exactly knows where it's coming from, but this is a great little grasp at hoping
it's
that
like a
you
nice
can
government bailout.
Hold on to your schools. There's also the finicky part of this where the Big 12 is not benefiting yet from anything the NCAA is going through.
Mm-hmm.
There are athletic directors that are saving up $30 million per Dellinger per year to help dole out money to the NCAA, who's in the middle of the suit, and give $22 million to student athletes, and they're going to up the scholarship numbers. Where that is not good, where the Big 12 has to pick up slack is, I don't know if Iowa State can afford that. I don't know if half the Big 12 conference can afford that. And if you cannot, you kind of go away.
Yeah, and I would go as far as saying there are a lot of schools that cannot afford that. And I'll go back to that interview because Mac Rhodes said it, the Baylor athletic director. He thinks between 85 and 95% of schools playing in Power 4 cannot afford that. Wow. And I mean, it makes sense. It's not that some schools can't do NIL. It's that most schools can't do pay to play. And then you're talking about back pay and all of this and trying to make it even. And how do you do that? It is a real, you're really backed up against the wall for it. And to go to the original point about, we love seeing the ACC implode to some extent. When the Pac-12 imploded, we knew that we could come in. We, being the Big 12, could come in, swoop in. And I don't know if it's that cut and dry with the ACC, as much as I'm sure they would love to come in and get, the leftovers of Duke and Miami and Virginia and schools like this. I don't know if it's that easy because the Big 12, you've already set up a media rights deal. You've already set up how that's going to be split up, and you add more teams. That just means less money. Am I wrong in that?
No, I feel like that's where you've hit the nail on the head.
But then again, if the ACC is imploded, then Brett Yormark can also go to the networks and say, hey, let's restructure this thing. Yeah. Because now I know ESPN's going to need something too. You know what I mean? Or a bigger cut. So there is that part of it, but just taking it from a vacuum, you would love to add more teams, generate more revenue, but it's going to be split up, and at least for the first few years, you are going to be just divvying out less money to everyone, or everyone's getting less money.
Dellinger poses the question, who follows them out the door? He doesn't answer the question, but he poses it, meaning that very likely that somebody else out there is, namely UNC, right there on the cusp of this thing. Coming up, Oklahoma made a bad call. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Look, I went and saw Zach Bryan this week, Charles Wesley Godwin. I went to the Thunder game against the Dallas Mavericks, and I just bought tickets for Tyler Childers. How did I do it? Gametime and the Gametime app. It is so easy to browse through that Gametime app and buy tickets the day of. That's what I did for the Zach Bryan concert, and they were stupid cheap because of last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% in tickets when it's right at the edge of the concert, like we're 45 minutes away, and they were dirt cheap because that's what Gametime does for you. It also gives you a view from your seat. You can toggle an option where it shows you the ticket prices without fees as well, and it's lowest price guaranteed, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Right now, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app for NBA tickets, MLB tickets, NHL, whatever you say. Locked On College is your code for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Terms apply. Create an account. Redeem code for last-minute tickets. Lowest prices, and that is guaranteed. Oklahoma regrets leaving the Big 12. That has become it. A year and a half ago, it was the murmur of, was that the right call? Competitively, was that the right call to go to the Southeastern Conference? And I think as of today, mid-May, and Oklahoma now has their football schedule released, a lot of those guys look around the room going, this could be bad.
This could be bad. And the timing could not have been worse in terms of, you're still, I know a lot of OU fans are still prove it to me, Brent Venables zone. You know what I mean? Like it's time to put up or shut up. And now your schedule just got exponentially tougher. And this all kind of ties back into the conference realignment and what it means to fans versus what it means to universities. And it is kind of funny how much it can change in just under 2 years, because you and I were talking about, boy, Texas is really going to regret this. OU might be able to own. But Texas is really going to regret this. And I still feel the same way about both programs, is that I don't think the way they've gone for Texas the last 10 years and for OU the last couple of years, that it's just going to be a nailed on, we're going to be at the top of this conference every year, especially in the West. I don't know that they'll become A&M in terms of how just rudderless A&M has become in that sport, but it's that risk that you take when you go in there. I mean, it's not going to be 6 straight conference championships, I can tell you that.
Yeah. And there are fans, OU fans, who will justify this by saying, well, now we have way more money. Well, now we get a massive revenue share from the SEC. And now our school is so much more rich than you all in the Big 12. And from my perspective, and I don't even know if it should be I think the Texas thing a lot of times was the pathos of it, of we just all hate Texas. So everybody point and laugh, see you later, we didn't need you in the conference anyway. For OU, there was less of that animosity. You respect the winner. You kind of have to respect the winner. And now they seem to be the ones getting the short end of the stick. And it's not this, oh, here's the pissed off Big 12 guy. Of course, you would think Oklahoma made a bad decision. Guess what, brother? That money, you're not going to see any of it. I'm not going to see any of it. I mean, and now what we know about where college athletics is going, schools are canceling their fun new stadiums. They're canceling their projects because they can't afford them anymore. OU's new money is not going to show up on your doorstep at all, but the losses are.
Yeah, and honestly, this does tie back into Baylor in a way, because we saw all these facilities being built at Baylor the last decade, and you think that's why they had a false start in NIL? Absolutely. Yeah. Like, it's tough to do that and then go ask people for money again. And this is kind of the reverse of it. OU definitely, I mean, or any school will need something in the next 10 years to keep beefing up for your recruiting profile. And that money's going to players. And it's going to a quality of a team, sure. But when you you brag about how great the SEC is for years, well, then that money is not going to stretch as far as it used to. It's like trying to find a house in Massachusetts versus finding one in Texas. I mean, it's just that money is not going to stretch as far. And I think of, talking about what we talked about in the last segment, going up to the Power 2. And I look at the SEC and the Big 10, and I don't think they're as close as a lot of people think from a competitive standpoint. The Big 10, the middle of the road in the Big 10, is about the middle of the road in the Big 12. Yeah. But they have 2 teams at the top that are there all the time. And so I say that to say, if OU had stayed in the Big 12 and been the big fish in the small pond, there would have been money there. And we're seeing it now. I mean, the expansion didn't come just because OU and Texas left the conference. Expansion came because expansion was available, right? So we're not talking about, there wouldn't be a Utah or a BYU or a Houston because OU and UT were still there. It would have been adding on to that. And if you could be that head honcho like you were, even with an expanded conference, which, by the way, Oklahoma should have been, then you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting the money, you're getting the prestige, because the ACC is still going to fall down, the Pac-12 is still going to fall down, without having that competitive imbalance, I guess we'll call it.
And it's not, it's not even Big 12 guy rags on Big 12. The SEC is better at football. There's, on the whole, the SEC is better than at football. And I'm perfectly willing to admit that. And then therein lies the problem for an OU fan is, what were your better odds of making college football playoff? Having Arizona State, Houston, and Arizona on your schedule, who they got shellacked by in the bowl game last year, or having Auburn on the road, having Ole Miss on the road, Alabama and LSU in consecutive weeks to end your season. It just doesn't feel like competitively Oklahoma's in the spot right now, or even, you give it a 10-year stretch. How many college football playoffs would they make in the SEC compared to the Big 12? I think that number is a pretty big gap.
It's it's no longer whatever, the late 20 teens, you were saying, well, they can make the college football playoff every year because they have that high-end talent. They've got great coaching, and the conference isn't the SEC or even the Big 10, but they don't have that anymore. And so to think of, I think seeing the Pac-12 already go and seeing the ACC start to deteriorate, that is not good news for Oklahoma or Texas for the reasons we just laid out. I mean, you could have been, we were whittling down to a Power 3 either way. And you decided to go into the one that is the toughest to win in.
That's not good for you, probably.
It's not great. And it's not great for the fan. Like that's what we care about, right? Like and that's what they've bragged about, UT especially, but OU as well, of, we're not going to get these 11 a.m. kickoffs. We get the money coming in. It's like, who cares, man?
Yep.
I mean, you're leaving a conference, and I get it. OU the last couple of years has not been the Oklahoma that you and I are used to, but you stay in that conference, man. You've got a real puncher's chance at the worst every year to win this thing.
And you're Oklahoma. That is a brand where if you go 10-2 in a 14-team, 12-team playoff format, you're Oklahoma. You're going to the college football playoff. You're 10-2 Oklahoma. If you are,
because and this might be controversial, and I don't even like saying it, because OU is a bigger brand than the Big 12.
Yeah.
UT is a bigger brand than the Big 12. And I would argue, I would say the same thing about the Big 10. Michigan and Ohio State are a bigger brand than the Big 10. So it really, as we've seen with the Big 10, it doesn't matter really how bad your conference is. Every once in a while you have a Florida State, and that stinks. And that stinks. And that's what you look at now and you say, Cam, you're an idiot. And I get that. But most years, if you're just Oklahoma and you take care of business and maybe you slip up against an Iowa State or a Kansas State on the road, you're still in. We've seen this blueprint before.
Not anymore. Now 10-2 Oklahoma definitely is in the playoff, but 10-2 Oklahoma is probably not happening. And you're right. I think Oklahoma being bigger than the Big 12 is not a wild thing. More people wear Oklahoma shirts than they do Big 12 shirts. Yeah. No one says, I'm a Big 12 fan, right? You're a fan of an entity, and that entity is OU. It's big enough to have survived well into the expanded college football playoff years in the Big 12, but I don't know if it can in the SEC. Coming up, Utah got a gift from Brett Yormark. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Monopoly Go is how I take the classic, awesome Monopoly game on the go. Like, I love to play it when I go. You're going camping with your friends, and you say, hey, somebody bring cards, somebody bring Monopoly. You play it. It's fun. What if you can't do that because you're on an airplane? Ha! Monopoly Go. You download the app today and play with your friends for unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete big albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. There's always new timed events to help you win big. Right now at Monopoly Go. Download it for free on the Google Play, the App Store. Game on. It's Monopoly Go. Download and play today. I think like Kansas State, Baylor, Texas Tech, everybody has the right to be super pissed with Utah football having the easiest schedule in maybe college football history. The only way that you could have been in a power conference and like bounced around every possible tough matchup, even with that added conference game against Baylor, who probably won't be very good and likely loses at Utah. It's almost embarrassing how well set up the Utes are with, I mean, look, Oklahoma State's tough, Arizona's tough, but after that, Arizona State, TCU, Houston, BYU, Colorado, a whole lot of teams there in a row that didn't win bowl games last year or sniff them, and we gifted that to Utah.
Yeah, I think you and I were actually on a show a few months ago talking about who would be the top contenders this year in the Big 12. And I think I had said someone else and then said Utah because I looked at the schedule. Like I think Utah should win the conference based off this. And you talk about the Baylor game. I mean, that's like adding, I hate saying it, but that's like adding a Vanderbilt or a Minnesota to your schedule. Oh, that's another Power 5 team, technically non-con, whatever. Yeah, but that's a win. You know what I mean? As it should be at home. I mean, Utah State's one of the toughest games on their schedule. They got to go to Logan, Utah. But other than that, I mean, Oklahoma State, I think is a good team. That might be their toughest game of the season there at Oklahoma State. But yeah, Arizona, we don't know. Arizona State stinks.
I mean, and
Arizona too, and nothing on the road. Like nothing really on the road.
The tough games
Colorado
being home.
Yeah.
You know, like here you say BYU is a big rivalry game. Could they slip up? Well, they're at home. They don't lose at home. But TCU is, that's an old rivalry we've rekindled. It's in Salt Lake City. If it was 2009, we'd feel a lot better about TCU in that game. Yeah,
but
probably. Yeah. You and I have been in Salt Lake City on a Utah game day, and at least the atmosphere outside the stadium, you couldn't really. But inside the stadium, they don't lose. They get
you know what it's like. Your viewers might not know. I am a huge Patriots fan, and for years they wouldn't lose at home. And it wasn't like they had raucous atmospheres. It wasn't Arrowhead Stadium. They just played really well at home. They had Tom Brady. Like, they just didn't lose at home. And that's what this Utah thing is. You and I were at that Chili's in Salt Lake City, I don't know, 2 miles maybe from the stadium.
Less than that. We were looking at the stadium.
No idea that there was a game going on. Yeah. In fact, I think we were like, oh, they must not be at home today. Turns out they were. Like,
they were playing as we were saying that.
Yeah, it's not like going to the black hole or something, but they just, I mean, you said it. They take care of business. They win at home.
I've seen the videos. I've seen the pictures. Good atmosphere for sure. Is it Jones AT&T when that place is rocking? I don't think so. Is it Boone Pickens when that place is rocking? I still don't think so. Not to say it's a bad venue by any means, but the fact that they win at home is the way they do is locked in. It's a given. Like, their home games consider Utah a win. And that's atmosphere. It's almost a compliment. Like, atmosphere began. Those guys win.
Can play. They would have been COVID national champs if they did a bubble like every other sport did.
And then your freaking road games at Houston.
I was gonna say, what do you think is their most difficult game?
You go on the road to Oklahoma State, and it's gonna be tough.
That's probably it. Yeah.
Knowing what we know about ESPN and FS1, that could very well be the 11 a.m. FS1 game where you're like, oh, why did they do that? And
you get that done in September. By the way,
right.
Which, if we're talking about playoff and
go lose the game, who cares?
Who cares? I mean, and Oklahoma State, I think is a solid team, but I don't know that they love their quarterback situation. Still, they could lose a couple games down the line, and the loss doesn't look as great. But you've got some ground that they need to make up in the standings. Oklahoma State, I mean, you lose that game in September. Who cares? Who cares? Even if it is a conference game. I mean, we saw Baylor lose up there like the same week of the season a couple of years ago and went on to win the conference. So, I mean, but that's probably it. Iowa State at home. I don't know. Colorado, I guess they'll be up for that game, but that's in November. I mean, they might be dead at that point.
Yeah, I don't know if they have a program in November.
I don't think they're 7-1 at that point.
I just need you're right. Iowa State's tough, but again, home. UCF on the road.
And you put that up. What's that? The week before Thanksgiving, that Iowa State game, you put that on at 8 p.m. local time.
Yeah.
And it is an atmosphere, and then you are in good shape. If assuming those are both good teams, which I think they will be, you could well have that. So just nothing that you see on the schedule that you circle and you're like, oh man, this is a bogey game right here,
isn't it?
Not one.
Does it keep you up at night at all that there are the horrors, that there are Utah fans who are like, this conference is easy, like they win 2 Pac-12 titles, and then they open this schedule and you go, huh, sweet. It's a little shocking that and maybe look, the people that make these football schedules aren't idiots. And this is one that you could directly affect which teams can represent the conference at the end of the season. I mean, we don't build schedules a year in advance every year, but when you do, it's pretty easy to say, oh, Utah's going to be good. We could probably give them a little favor. And that's what this looks like. It just sucks that your Kansas State doesn't get that, or your West Virginia or Oklahoma State, who returns so many guys.
You're loyal. You're loyal guys. I'm the king of forced analogies. I'm going to force one right here. It's like when they look at the schedule and they say, oh my God, this conference is so easy. It's like when Messi went to that Celtics Heat game a couple weeks ago and Derek White had like 35 points and people were like, Messi must think Derek White runs the league. He is the association. Like that's what Utah's going to say. They're going to be like, this the Big 12, this is the big bad Big 12. Like, and then they roll through it at 11-1 and everyone's like, my God, Utah's the best team in the country.
Yeah. And then
we could be talking about that in a couple months.
Then they go to the Big 10. Then they go to the SEC because we all consolidate down to Pangea college football.
Yes, baby.
And all rock with one specific. Everybody's in just one conference. No Charlie Baker, no Jim Phillips. All the big names are gone. They're done. Where can people find your stuff? The Cam Show, by the way, little cross promotion.
Cam Show, yes, it's at the Cam Show on YouTube and on Twitter. That's with the new Rogue Media Sports Network. I'm in the studio right now. I haven't got my personal touches on it yet. That's why you see Hulk Hogan and Mike Tyson punching me in the side of the head. But yes, we're dropping episodes a couple a week, and then once we get to football season, we're live 5 days a week. And then you can find Locked On Baylor, of course, on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, and at Locked On Baylor on Twitter.
This has been, it always will be. Come back on Monday. We do more sports. Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Baylor and Dose Grande.